Talking with the experts.
Join leadership coach Mary Gregory as she unpacks the complexities of ego in business. Learn to leverage it for success in episode 511.
The way we can use it is to firstly recognize we have an ego. I mean, I've gone into sessions with leaders before where the CEO, for example, said, "Oh, I don't have an ego." I'm like thinking, "Oh, straight away, there it is." It's about recognizing that we all have it. It's part of being human. So recognizing that straight away. And also practicing self-compassion with ourselves for the fact that our ego will get activated, and noticing the things that trigger us that might cause us to go into an ego reaction, as it were, is a great way to start managing that. So it does come from self first. I would always say, understand yourself, understand what you're running, what's pushing or driving you, where your ego is playing up or not playing up, where's it serving or not serving you, is really useful to notice before you then start trying to figure others out.
Talking with the experts.
Welcome to Talking with the Experts, where we believe that success is a journey, and every journey is easier with help from friends. That's why we bring you top-notch experts and real business heroes eager to share their lessons from the road to success. We delve into new topics each week: effective marketing strategies, innovative problem-solving, financial planning, and team building. We tackle everything you need to know to grow your business and keep it thriving. Whether you dream about launching your first startup or a business veteran looking to shake things up, we've got you covered. With each episode, you'll gain knowledge, boost your confidence, and be inspired to take action. So, grab a coffee, make yourself comfortable, and join our exciting journey. You're not alone in this. We're here, guiding you, cheering for you, and celebrating each milestone. Let's turn your business dreams into reality, starting today. Here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is all about business by business owners for business owners. You can find it on all podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. Today, it's my very great pleasure to introduce you to Mary Gregory. And Mary is all the way from the UK, and she's going to be sharing with us all things about the ego, the good and the bad of it, the ugly, and how to ensure success rather than self-sabotage. Now, as we know, ego you can't live without it, and you can't live with it. It shows up in all forms and can compromise our ability to manage ourselves and build relationships with others. So as an entrepreneur, we require the drive and the strengths of our ego, but we also don't need our ego's well-worn defense mechanisms that can sabotage our success. And just a little bit about Mary before I bring her onto camera. She is a sought-after international leadership coach, best-selling author, and coach of who has led change for organisations, including First Choice Holidays, O2, Ralph Lauren, and Tesco. She's a trusted coach to business leaders and small business owners. She enables her clients to confidently navigate complex challenges, transforming negative patterns, holding them back. Hence, then they will confidently move forward to create the meaningful desired result. Mary, thank you so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to meet you.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thanks for having me here, Rose.
How did you become so adept at discussing ego and how it can be good and bad for us at the same time?
Right. So in terms of my work, it goes back many, many years. And I guess one of the things that I got curious about, not only with my clients, working with my clients and seeing what might hold or empower them, was also noticing for myself when I got in my own way as well. As that lovely phrase, you've got to get out of your own way, which actually I reference in my book, in that it's, get over yourself and lead. We sometimes do find ourselves getting in our own way. And the common thread that kept coming through for me it was all about our ego. And the challenge with ego is that we are in ego probably 80% of the time, because we are in automatic pilot probably about 80% of the time. And it's when we are more conscious and intentional and aware that we can transcend our ego. But most of the time we are in our ego. So therefore, to try and raise consciousness around that and accept that it's part of who we are, because I think ego gets a really bad press. It's like, oh, she's got such a massive ego, aren't they awful, sort of thing. But actually, we've all got ego and it's part of who we are. And it's about learning about that part of ourselves so we can navigate it effectively. I can go on for hours, but as you can probably tell, that was what I was going to say was, the thing about ego is, we give it that bad press, but it also is a driving force for us. So those people, though, you think about some great leaders in the world, they will have big egos because they stand for something that's really important and they are not going to let it go. And therefore, it is a driving force for us. But what we've got to be mindful of is not allowing the negative parts of that driving force to become something that might sabotage us.
I mean, I know growing up, and you'd meet somebody who was really confident or overly confident, and you'd say, God, they've got a huge ego.
Yes.
They really love themselves. And, it used to be said in such a bad way because, they weren't very humble. They didn't appear humble anyway.
Yeah. Yes. And of course, humbleness is one of the behaviors that's recognized that's effective for leadership now, that it helps you build that connection with people. So being vulnerable, is a positive thing, considered a positive thing these days. And that does take getting over your ego. If you are someone who, your ego trap, and I talk about ego traps in my book, if your ego trap is all about being really fantastic and being confident, that can be quite off-putting to other people who may feel more vulnerable and intimidated by you. So that is something to take on, really. It's just be aware of what your ego traps are. How do they help you, but also how could they potentially sabotage you?
Yeah. So what are the ego traps, Mary?
So for me, let me just say, first of all, what I think ego is. So I think ego is, it's our sort of well-honed defense system. It's almost like we have a whole defense system around us. And in the olden days, when we were out on the plains looking for food or whatever, we were constantly scanning for threats and for things that would be good for us. So if there's nice fruit on the tree, we go and pick it, that'd be fine. Or if there was a saber-toothed tiger coming towards us, we'd either fight or we'd be off. But nowadays, what we are scanning for constantly is threats from a social anxiety point of view. What's going on around us that could maybe threaten how we're seen in the world, or might threaten our sense of self in some way. And our ego is there to protect us, which is why it's so valuable to us, but it also can hinder us because it's based on decisions we've made, usually as children. And that's where our ego traps come from. So, we have sort of different types of ego traps that are, first of all, those that we would regard as overinflated. So the ones we've been talking about so far, being overconfident, making it all about us, those are ego traps that are going to catch us out from being that overinflated type of ego. Typical ones are, you may have had a line manager or may have found yourself doing this. This is one of mine, which is, do it now. We've got to do it really quickly. Just get on with it. And we end up pushing people into doing things that they might not necessarily want to do. And also we might not have thought through enough, but we're on that survival mechanism. We just got to get this sorted out. So we end up pushing people through. Or being this person who's able to do it all by themselves, really strong. I'll just, it's like taking a solo flight. I don't need anyone to come with me. And of course, in the leadership world, you need others. You can't do everything on your own. And if you're somebody who's just everything, I don't need other people to help me, that can be very isolating, and leadership can be isolating anyway. But also that doesn't help build connection with people. So you've really got to watch out for those overinflated ego traps. And I do talk about others in the book as well. But then there's also what I talk about, underinflated ego traps. And this gets less talked about in terms of it being recognized as ego. People don't necessarily see this as ego, but it's still a defense strategy. So, for example, another one of my own is people pleasing. I made a decision when I was young that if I did what other people said, or made sure they were happy, that I'd be okay. And that's quite a common one that women actually take on from quite a young age. It's a very societal expectation, I think, that we have of women. Certainly when I was brought up, it might be less so now. So that's one of the underinflated ones, or being in that state of never being good enough, that sort of be perfect, always driving to try and find that perfection, which so often eludes us. That's another sort of it's a quieter type of ego that you'll come across, but it's still our ego. And that's what I mean by overinflated and underinflated.
Yeah, well, I think people in our age group were brought up a certain way. I mean, I know as a child it was, children needed to be seen and not heard, and so I grew up in a very violent home, so you would do anything to stay out of trouble, and because the smallest infraction would incur a punishment of some type. So as a child, I always learned how to people please, and that carried right into my adult life, and I still find myself doing it from time to time, but then I pick myself up on it because I think, well, it's not suiting me, because it's not making me happy. I'm doing it just to please the other person, just to stop conflict, I guess.
Yes, and then your needs end up being shortchanged.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're looking after everybody else's.
And that's what happens in business a lot of times too. We try to please our clients or our customers when perhaps they're not the right fit for us anyway, but we persevere on because that's just the way it's done and the way we've told it's been done. Customer's always right, when in fact you've got to change that narrative and say, well, they're not always right.
Yes, that's right. And you've also got to remember that what you learned as a child served you, so it helped you survive, it helped you live. But as an adult, you're not a 6-year-old child anymore. You're an adult now, and you can make different choices, and you can make choices that are fair, not just for others, but also for yourself. So it's not like you're suddenly going to become this selfish, it's all about me, which is going the other direction. It's about managing that people-pleasing side of yourself, so that you make sure your needs get catered for as well as other people.
Yeah, it's very important, that self-care has been bandied around more so in the last 3 or 4 years, I think, since the pandemic, really, I think.
Yes.
And it's very important that we do the self-care so that, our ego doesn't get in the road, and that, we have time for ourselves, and you can balance your life.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, part of what I write about in my book is, how do you manage your ego? How do you make sure that you're able to notice when your ego is coming in and it's not necessarily being so helpful for you? I mean, self-awareness is absolutely key, but I do talk a lot about we're all much able to manage ourselves better when our energy is really topped up and we're fully resourced, which absolutely is the self-care piece, really. So
we might find out what the title of your book is, Mary.
Oh, you can. Well, I've got it here, actually. I've got a copy here. It's called Ego, Get Over Yourself and Lead. So, the whole subject matter is there on the cover. And yes, it's available on Amazon. So
wonderful. And so, what can we learn from others about ego? Because we have to work with other people. We have to be able to communicate. We have to be able to interact with others. How can we use our ego to the best advantage?
Yes. So I think the first way we can use it is to firstly recognize we have an ego. I mean, I've gone into sessions with leaders before where the CEO, for example, said, oh, I don't have an ego. I'm like thinking, oh, straight away, there it is. It's about recognizing that we all have it. It's part of being human. So recognizing that straight away, and also practicing self-compassion with ourselves for the fact that our ego will get activated, and noticing the things that trigger us that might cause us to go into an ego reaction, as it were, is a great way to start managing that. So it does come from self first, I would always say, understand yourself, understand what you're running, what's pushing or driving you, where your ego is playing up or not playing up, where is it serving or not serving you, is really useful to notice before you then start trying to figure others out. I'm not the sort of coach that would say, oh, I mean, you know, with my clients, we do explore different relationships and how can they influence more effectively, and how can they make sure they're in a position where they feel powerful with that person. But a lot of that comes from trying to understand the other person, because I'm a great advocate for, you know, information is power. So if you don't really understand where the other person's coming from, you're missing an awful lot of information. And when you do understand, then again, you can try and find common ground and ways forward, which is particularly relevant for when there might be conflict around in a relationship. To find that common ground is so important, but also to recognize the other person and their vulnerability and our, you know, our ego. Remember, it's a defense strategy. So underneath it all, we're feeling vulnerable. And to be compassionate around that, I think, is really, really important. So I talk about self-compassion, but also compassion for the other person. And I actually think that, you know, empathy and compassion and the ability to really listen and understand where somebody is coming from are some of the most important leadership attributes you can have as a leader, because it is all about relationships and it's all about people. If you can't get people to come with you, then you're going to be a bit stuck, you know, and you want to have sustainable commitment from people. You don't want it just to be fly by night because you've coerced them into it. You want them to come with you willingly and because they feel like you're really bothered and connected with them. So, you know, it is get clear about where your own ego might be getting in the way, and then try and understand where the other person's coming from.
Yeah. So how can we stop the self-sabotage, Mary?
The self-sabotage. Well, first of all, I hate to sound like you know, I'm going to sound like I'm being the doom and gloom person here. You know, I've been doing this stuff for years. There are still moments I'll self-sabotage. There are still moments where my ego will kick in and I'll go into activation and I'm triggered, you know, I'm getting annoyed about something. I think my family probably see the worst of that. But it's the key is, you know, really, first of all, get clear and self-aware of what your different ego traps are, what the triggers are. So with my clients, quite often I'll invite them to keep a diary. So, and that diary can be around different things. It can be around their emotions, noticing when their emotions are calm and they're feeling good, noticing when they've suddenly not feeling so good at different times of the day, because we're like that during the day. Nothing is fixed. Often as human beings, we talk like, I'm feeling really angry, and it's like, it's the end, but that's it. I'm stuck in this anger. But nothing is fixed. Our emotions are like that the whole way through the day. So starting to understand our emotions is useful. And also keeping a trigger diary as well. So whenever you notice you get triggered by something, trying not to be given by it. So trying not to react to it, but maybe going away and just journaling and noticing, what is it that's really bugging me about this? Because the more we can self-understand, the more we have some choice about how we do things, and how we manage our behavior. And I'm also, you know, you mentioned self-care, but I'm also a great advocate for the more you can get present and in the moment, the easier it is. And you know, the work of Eckhart Tolle, he talks about the power of now, because when we're in the now, it's very hard for our ego to be there. Ego is all past based. It's all being triggered by things that reminded us of our past, where we go into survival mode, or it's all about the future. I'm worried about the future. I'm anxious about what could happen. So we're not present. So by getting really present, that can help us get out of ego. Really, really useful. And a way to get present is to just take 3 deep breaths, get both feet on the floor. If you sat down, put your feet on the floor, get yourself into a neutral position, because neutral positions, again, we're not going into attacking anyone or becoming defensive. In this neutral position, we are just centered. Take 3 deep breaths, and we can change our state through those 3 deep breaths and get ourselves into the present moment. And that is when it's very hard for ego to act up when we're in that present moment. That will help us prevent us from reacting and sabotaging ourselves.
Yeah, that's really a great tip. Thank you for sharing that, Mary. I think, you know, a lot of us, we go through our day and we're not present. We're so busy, focused on task at hand, and thinking 3 steps ahead sometimes about the next task and the task after that. So working in the moment is quite helpful. I do that when sometimes I start to get overwhelmed, because I realize that once I finish this one, I've got another task to do and another task to do. And I think just sit back, take a deep breath, and just work on one task at a time. And that way then nothing gets wrecked.
Yes. This is what I'm doing now. All of that can go to one side. It'll get taken or later. Just focus on the now. Really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
actually, getting into your, again, linking it to self-care, getting into some sort of routine where you're meditating regularly, or at least practicing mindfulness, where you just become more conscious and focus on your breathing. Some very simple things you can do. Just help yourself get into that present moment. It's very relaxing. It reduces the stress that we experience, which again
certainly does. Yes.
Which again, it helps. If we're feeling less stressed, we're much more able to manage ourselves.
Yeah, let's look at the good side of ego, because we've been discussing the bad side of ego. Let's discuss the good side. What is good about ego?
Well, I think the thing that's positive about it is it does, having a purpose and being clear of our purpose, and being a stand for something. So I can think about a very senior leader that I coach and have been coaching for some time, and he was promoted up through the organization to be at the very top, on the most senior board within the organization. And there were some really difficult dynamics on that board, and he felt himself feeling quite alone, different to everybody else. But he was really clear that he had a certain belief around how we should be behaving at this level, that we're really critical role models to what goes on in the rest of the organization. And I think without him having a positive ego that drove him to, we've got to try and create ourselves differently, we've got to start behaving and building relationships between ourselves much more positively than we have at the moment. He was a stand for sorting out the dynamics on that board. And I think without that, it took ego for him to really stand up there and push back. And I think that's the positive elements of it, that it does enable you when you have it, it gives you a stand for something. We've got to maybe sometimes own that side of ourselves, that's something that's something positive. And some people might say, well, he can't be a crusader. Some people say, well, he's being a crusader, that's his ego. Well, actually, I'm thinking, well, there's a positive side to being a crusader, so embrace that and use it. And absolutely, it's taken him time. He's had to learn to navigate and when to hold back and when to let it come forward. So it's not like he's acting without awareness, but he's also knowing what, he's very clear when he's going to stand up and take a stand on it. And he's actually helping enable change, not just on the board, but that's impacting the whole of the organization.
Yeah, and crusaders really have a place in the world, because things don't change if you haven't got the crusader.
That's right. You just got to make sure you don't start rescuing everybody and trying to take over, but it's like, use it as a driving force for good.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So, Mary, your book, you said, was on Amazon. Where can people find you if they want to work with you, or
so
find out a bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so I tend to work with more senior leaders who are usually navigating quite complex change, but I also do a lot of work with women leaders as well, particularly enabling women to step up and feel confident in organizations where there might be a lot of bias and prejudice that they're having to push against. So I do a lot of work with women as well. You can find me on LinkedIn, so do connect with me there. I'm always welcome to connect with people. And also I have my own website, marygregory.com, where I put regular blog posts. And I also write for Forbes. I'm a member of Forbes Coaches Council, so I regularly write for them as well. So you can always connect with me via there as well.
That's a big achievement.
Yeah, no, it's good. I enjoy that.
Mary, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you and to hear all about the good and the bad and the ugly about ego. But I'd like to ask you this question. If you could give some advice to somebody, doesn't matter, it can be personal wise or work related, what might that be?
Final piece of advice. Okay, I think the final piece of advice I would give to anybody actually is that you're a human being, and we all get it wrong sometimes, and we all let our ego take over sometimes. So don't make it worse by beating yourself up. Just accept, okay, that's happened. Practice some self-compassion, learn from it, and move on. And don't get caught up in the drama of it and let it shape who you are. It's not who you are. You are a human being who's learning and making your way in the world.
Absolutely. And if we don't
if you
learn
embrace
something every
that,
day, yes.
yeah,
If you don't learn something every day, then you're not living, I don't think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Very
Mary,
good.
thank you so much. And then I look forward to talking to you again at another time.
That's lovely. Thank you, Rose. It's been a real pleasure.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.